When you buy groceries, drive over a bridge, or pick up some building materials, there is a massive, invisible global dance that just took place to make it all happen. Welcome to this explainer, where we are diving headfirst into the staggering, high-stakes, hidden army that literally works day and night to keep our planet moving. Today, we're going to make that invisible world visible.
$6 trillion. That's the scale of the heavy logistics world we're talking about here. This is an industry where no item is too big, no route is too difficult, and the pressure never, ever stops. It's a world where teams operate across land, air, and sea to tackle colossal challenges, all just to ensure that our everyday lives carry on without a hitch.
To wrap our heads around how they actually do this, we're going to look at how these crews beat the challenge of scale, battle the forces of nature, race against the clock, and ultimately keep the world moving.
First up, beating the challenge of scale, featuring the massive bridge girder.
We're following a fabricated steel bridge girder all the way from Darlington in the northeast of England down to New Haven on the south coast. And to really grasp the scale of this mission, picture the length, 50 meters. I mean, passing a regular truck on the highway feels big, right? But when you have a 50-meter hunk of steel sitting inside a 25-acre factory, it completely warps your sense of what can actually be driven on public roads.
And then there's the weight. We are talking about 55 solid tons of steel. You're definitely not moving this thing with a forklift. Just to lift it off the ground so they can paint the underside, they have to use a dual gantry crane setup, an absolute beast with a 90-ton lift capacity, using special high-tensile steel straps that can handle 40 tons each.
So how do you even get this behemoth out the door? You use a highly specialized 30-meter truck with 15 axles. And it's not just one big flatbed. It's actually split into two separate hydraulically controlled trailers. The driver and a steering operator literally have to drive their own halves completely independently just to squeeze around tight factory corners and local roundabouts.
Now imagine driving this thing 500 kilometers, maxing out at a blisteringly fast 40 miles per hour. Yeah, it requires a full police escort and takes 2 painstakingly slow days. They are forced to take roundabouts at barely 5 kilometers per hour. Sometimes they even have to plow right through purposely designed lanes straight through the middle of the roundabout just to clear the turn.
So they finally complete that 500-kilometer trek and arrive at the construction site. But heavy October rain has turned the ground to mush. The massive delivery rig loses all traction and sinks 6 inches deep into the mud. The wheels are just spinning, totally useless, literally inches from the finish line.
And you know what the solution is? In this high-tech world of mega shipping, sometimes you just need an incredibly low-tech brute force fix. They literally bring in a bulldozer and shove it. The team physically pushes the back wheels of the trailer into its final position so the girder can finally be unloaded onto its resting stools. It really goes to show that even the most meticulously laid plans still rely on quick, on-the-ground thinking.
But then comes the crazy precision. The senior agent mentioned they could put this thing on a sixpence if you asked them to, and he's not kidding. After all that brute force, they bring in a massive 1,200-ton crane to lift this 55-ton girder 20 meters up into the air and then thread the needle over an active passenger railway line to the exact millimeter. That mix of massive scale and pinpoint accuracy is just mind-blowing.
Moving on to our second challenge, battling the forces of nature with the timber ship. Let's head over to the treacherous east coast of Scotland, trading massive steel for heavy timber. The contrast here is wild. On one hand, you've got this behemoth of a cargo ship, the Skogeren, measuring 83 meters long and packed with 2,600 tons of Swedish timber. On the other hand, you have the terrifyingly fragile human element. A port pilot has to perfectly time a physical leap of faith from a tiny boat onto the ship's rope ladder, dangling over freezing, turbulent 6-degree seawater. One tiny slip and it's an absolute disaster. With Storm Dennis rolling in and whipping up 8-meter waves in the North Sea, the ship's captain makes a brutal but necessary life-or-death call. Safety first. He decides to delay the ship's departure back to Sweden for a full 24 hours. And here's why. Counterintuitively, an empty, unladen ship sits much higher in the water, making it a massive target for high winds and incredibly vulnerable to capsizing. Knowing exactly when to hit the brakes is just as crucial as knowing how to move. Once the ship does safely dock in Montrose, offloading the timber requires this towering, transformer-like machine, the Liebherr 110 crane.
This thing has a massive 27-meter reach and can rip out 20 huge packs of wood every hour. But doing this in winds topping 40 knots? They are operating right on the absolute razor's edge of high-risk safety thresholds, battling the elements for every single load.
Now for our third challenge, racing against the clock with fresh fish.
We are trading heavy loads and harsh weather for pure, unadulterated speed. To really get why Grimsby's fresh food logistics are so intense, you need a little history. Back in the day, Grimsby was actually the largest fishing port in the entire world. But the Cod Wars, those geopolitical territorial disputes in the 1970s, completely wiped out their local fleet. So today, they rely heavily on importing thousands of tons of fish all the way from Iceland.
And the timeline for this is unbelievably tight. First, the fish is caught and processed in Iceland. Then, it's flown almost 1,700 kilometers to East Midlands Airport. From there, it's immediately loaded onto trucks for a midnight sprint 167 kilometers to Grimsby, where it's processed in a strictly controlled room between 0 and 2 degrees. The ultimate goal? From catch to supermarket in under 36 hours. It is quite literally a high-speed daily sprint across countries.
The operations director perfectly described it as a ticking timer all the time. That totally captures the sweat-inducing reality of the factory floor. The second that fish arrives, the team has to process 10 tons of premium cod and haddock flawlessly. They have exactly a 6-hour window to do it, and that clock does not stop until those fully sealed trays are safely chilling in the dispatch zone.
Because the margin for error here is literally zero. If one single thing goes wrong, a delayed flight, a traffic jam on the highway, even a slight bump in the room temperature, the ice melts and an entire shipment of premium seafood is basically garbage before it even gets on a delivery truck. This whole logistics network has to execute a completely flawless symphony every single day.
And that brings us to our final takeaway, keeping the world moving. So how do these wild battles against scale, nature, and time actually connect back to us? Well, whether it's building our city infrastructure with massive steel beams, securing vital raw materials like timber during violent storms, or feeding millions via global air freight, this highly coordinated global dance never ever stops. It relies entirely on incredible human expertise, precise engineering, and just pure determination. It really makes you look at the everyday objects around you differently, doesn't it? The next time you drive over a bridge, build something out of wood, or just buy fresh fish for dinner, think about the invisible battles against scale, nature, and time that were fought just to bring it to you. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and definitely keep an eye out for the hidden logistics happening right outside your own door.